that's useful, but I do think it's important occasionally to make some points. On page 14, in the middle paragraph, it talks about that it says, furthermore, the amount of nitrogen applied to a particular crop varies widely among growers, period. Some growers apply less than what a certified crop advisor recommends as the typical crop nitrogen uptake, and some growers apply 3, 4, and 5 times as much nitrogen as is recommended. The footnote to the references in the record, well, I went and I looked at these references in the record, and what I was expecting to find are specific testimony or comments from experts or CCAs saying they made recommendations that growers violated, which to me is what the comment says. Maybe that wasn't its intent. Well, I went and looked at those references, and what they are the reports that experts have put to, or that folks put together after grants based upon their field trials as what growers could do to help lower their nitrogen use in lettuce and other crops. And they were PowerPoint presentations. They were educational materials designed to educate growers, and they were reports on grants that had been provided. There was nothing to suggest that any CCA in the Central Coast has ever said or testified that they make recommendations and growers ignore them. So I was a little bothered by the context of that statement, and I just wanted to correct, and with my understanding of the references for which had been provided. I also want to talk very briefly on the individual surface water monitoring requirements. We would support the draft order as proposed to, eliminate the containment monitoring. But overall, we still have serious concerns with the requirement onto itself. The requirement for individual surface water monitoring, the draft order continues
from. And we have some very strong CCAs on the Central Coast. However, we don't have that many CCAs who can work with all of the different components of this regulation and who have the experience to do so. At one time, I believe there were only, I think we determined about 6 on the Central Coast who could really meet all of the requirements to at that time, we were looking at kind of a sign-off of the Irrigation Nutrient Management Plan. And that's a very low number when you're looking at how many acres at the 400,000 acres that you're estimating you have here on the Central Coast. There are some very strong CCAs on the Central Coast who make recommendations to their growers. There's one, Joel Wiley, who asked that I state his name. He would have liked to have been here today, and unfortunately he had a prior commitment. But he has, given me examples over the years of all of the different things that growers do. He and his firm and other firms have addressed. There are things that have been done on the Central Coast looking at breeding programs to the root structure of lettuce crops that has broadened the roots so that they can pull up more of the fertilizers from a broader area. Looking at when the nitrogen or the fertilizer is applied to the crop. And a lot of research has been done by these CCAs and their firms and these growers looking at putting that kind of that shot in towards the last 30 days of the crop, which is when the crop has really needed it. So over the last 20 years, there have been a lot of things that have been done on the ground, and these recommendations have come from CCAs. These have come from growers doing trials with CCAs and UC and other organizations. I would just say growers are working with CCAs if they have the resources to do so, and many are trying to and looking for those resources. But the larger the grower, the more resources they have to do trials, to work with CCAs, to try out some of these new innovative technologies. As the growers are less large and don't have that kind of infrastructure, the less opportunity, and there aren't that many CCAs, from what I've been told, on the Central Coast. There aren't enough to meet the full demand that can really do everything that's needed.
Honing in on the issue of application of fertilizer, their experience to be able to deal with those recommendations.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in speaking with Mr. Wiley, and saying that there's this thought that some growers might be using 5 times the amount of fertilizer that's required, he was taken aback. He actually said, please use the word shocked and appalled, because he can't even imagine an instance where a grower would do so. It's illogical. He feels that, his recommendations, of course, there's art, there's a lot that goes into producing a crop. You're looking at many years of experience. You're looking at what you've experienced last year. You're looking at previous weather patterns. You're looking at a lot of things. But a CCA is a wonderful resource, and I cannot imagine a member of mine nor a grower in the Valley that would ever take a recommendation by a CCA and say, I'm going to triple, or what is that, quintuple it. It's absolutely absurd. So I think that they are very well respected. I think we could use more CCAs that really understand the cropping patterns and the crops on the Central Coast.
And then on the issue of cost, the 8 to, what was it that Ms. Dunham said, 8 to 10,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, per farm. Is that per farm? What's the variation in terms of size, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3?
That estimate came from I would say a farm that had thousands of acres, but I'm not sure of those which were in tier 2 or tier 3. I couldn't tell you that right off the top of my head. But they did do their photo monitoring. They invested quite a bit of their growers' time not in the photo monitoring, in the QAP and the SAP, quite a bit of their growers' time working on that. Then they invested another 30 plus hours of a consultant's time to prepare all of the information, and then they sent it to the firm that prepared the QAP and the SAP. So that 8 to 10 isn't even inclusive of the time that they spent investing in a consultant who could prepare all of the data and the information needed to even get it to the firm. And then additionally, I did say photo monitoring is a slip of the tongue, but the photo monitoring for that same grower, they spent over 85 hours this spring alone complying with photo monitoring through their consultant.
No,
That drip irrigation, what are you seeing? And I know the crops are, it's just dependent upon the crop type, but what are you seeing in terms of the percentage of growers that are utilizing drip?
I think as appropriate to the crop, then absolutely. You've seen, since the adoption of the 2004 waiver, I've been told that you've seen the implementation of drip irrigation increase very dramatically. And I think that, of course, there are crops where you need to kind of create a stand for the crop and you can't use drip irrigation. But I think a lot of growers have implemented it as it's appropriate, and you see a lot more drip irrigation used throughout, I think, throughout agriculture, but absolutely throughout the Central Coast.
And I'm just assuming that maybe other board members know that maybe not, though. Maybe if you could explain how drip helps to reduce the amount of fertilizer applied.
Right, and I would maybe even look to one of our growers to come up. He could explain it better, but absolutely, when you're using a drip system, then that fertilizer is being shot directly onto the root system of the plant. It's called fertigation, right? And so it's moving through that drip system, and it's getting to the plant exactly what it needs when it needs it, and you can really just amend your whole process for what you know that plant needs when it needs it, and that is really the beauty of the drip system. One of the many benefits of it, if again it's appropriate to your cropping system.
Good. No, please, the questions are really important, helpful.
I was struck earlier when we were told that the use of nitrogen has been reduced in recent years because of the cost, the price of application, which indicates that it's possible to have good crops with reduced use. And so that really is the goal here. It's to reduce the amount of nitrogen that's going into the environment and potentially into the waters. So I mean, how would you see us grappling? I mean, we can't raise the price. I don't think you want that, but we do want that outcome.
So what I really envision, I mean, I do think that, as the price changes, the growers are looking at, they're looking to use their resources efficiently and wisely, always. Mm-hmm. And that is why I think that 5 times, the amount that a CCA recommended, it's an absurd statement. But coming off of that, how do we make sure that growers are using their resources wisely? I think that gets to the crux of your question. And to me, I really see something, like Tess said, similar to what we have in the East San Joaquin, where you have a coalition-type organization that can work with growers on the farm and look at BMPs that are going to really manage their resources. And, the Grower Shipper Association, working with some of our partners in the Farm Bureaus, we've actually looked at creating an organization right now that's going to start looking at that, called On-Farm Solutions, and looking at nitrate quick tests specifically. We got some recommendations from our water committee saying, we want to understand nitrate quick tests better. They've been used for, I believe, over 20 years on the Central Coast. There's still a lot of growers. I'm going to give you an example. I have a very good friend. He's a 400-acre grower, and he does not use the nitrate quick test, or maybe he's used it once or twice, and he grows a number of different crops on the Central Coast. And he's told me, I would love to try it, but I don't have the time. He is a one-man show. His wife does the books in the evening and on the weekends when the kids are asleep, and his mother, who's a school teacher, works on his irrigated lands requirements on her summers when she's not teaching. And this is the challenge. You want to be able to provide a system so that you have the growers that don't necessarily have all of the same resources, and they can benefit from it. They can learn from what's been happening on different farms for many years, and we can start focusing on putting BMPs on the ground and trialing BMPs more on a commercial scale, so that growers throughout, no matter their size, no matter their cropping type, can really start using some of these BMPs that are going to affect water quality. That's what we want to see. That is the model that I envision, so that we're using our resources efficiently, that we're bringing sound science onto the farm, and that we're really improving water quality. All right, thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Oh,
Can I ask a quick question also?
You may.
Thank you. May I ask a quick question? Yeah, well, either one of you.
no, but into the mic.
I always do this. On the costs for the individual surface water discharge monitoring, mostly that came up in the context of the stay order, so I think the costs we got from you were on the SAP and the QAP The regional board had provided some cost numbers around, I think, 5,000 for the sampling and actually doing the monitoring. Do you agree with that number, or did you have different numbers for that?
You know, I'd have to go back and look. I'm pretty certain in the declarations that were submitted both in support of the request for stay as well as part of the stay proceeding, we included sampling cost in addition to just the QAP cost, but I don't remember what those were off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look. We can look and try to get back to you later after lunch or whatever, but I don't recall.
Okay, thanks. So. If you have them, it's helpful to know where they are.
Okay, I will find those. And I did remember the one other thing I was going to say. You know, you gave a lawyer time to think. It's a bad thing to do.
Well, just think I'm giving everybody else some lunchtime to be doing their thing. So.
And you know, the comments about from regional board response was, you know, well, this is reporting that we need, and this is the minimal reporting required, and I'm going to suggest, Member Spivey Weber, that you take a quick look at a program very close to your heart with respect to recycled water, and look at the types of reporting requirements associated with the recycled water program. And I guarantee you, or at least in all the reclamation permits that I've worked on, and I've worked on a number of them, there are no requirements with respect to crop or plant uptake values and total nitrogen applied and estimating load. You know, I mean, we look at, there's a pretty good comparison here when you're talking about agricultural systems and the recycled water. You know, there's another comment that really struck me in the regional board response that talks about, well, and we want to prioritize people whose irrigation water exceeds the drinking water standard. Well, everything I've understood, growers are being told to pump and fertilize, meaning take that high-level nitrate water and use it to fertilize. But now, based upon the comments in the regional board response, that's going to be their target as to whether they are complying with the nitrate provisions or not within the order. So we seem to be sending mixed messages that we want you to pump and fertilize and test and take value, but we're also going to, those are the ones we're going to prioritize to go out to see if they have efficient nitrogen management practices because their irrigation water exceeds the drinking water standard. So I think we have some mixed messages. I think we need, the expert panel is a great venue to take a step back and look at what we need to do to make this work practically for everybody and to be protective of water quality in all instances. So we would support pretty much the draft order as proposed with some modest changes that we have suggested in our comments.
Thank you very much. We will now take a break and reconvene at 2:10. I'm going to give you a little more time.
Yeah, when, in normal, not ag water recycling, but in using recycled water, very